Hey guys, thanks for joining us for another episode of the Dine Sports YouTube page and podcast network. Today is episode 2, and we will be joined by Skyler Winsor, who is the founder and CEO of Unsung Hero Clothing apparel company. Skyler has a really interesting journey. He's taken a fairly non-traditional route to get to where he is in life. And he's going to share with us some of the tips and tricks that got him from a kid who came from Timmins, Ontario with first and last month's rent, moved to Ottawa, took one college course and decided that was not the route for him. Went on to actually end up forming the company and has been absolutely crushing it, not only in the community, but across Canada and North America as well in the apparel industry. So he's going to walk us through his journey, share some tips, tricks, strategies as far as what to avoid, what he wish he knew at the start of his journey as well too, and really give some insight to what life in the competitive market of athletics and apparel looks like on a day-to-day basis there. So hope you guys enjoy. Without further ado, Skyler Winsor. Hey guys, welcome to the Dine Sports YouTube and podcast page. Today I'm joined by Skyler Winsor. He's the CEO and founder of Unsung Hero Clothing apparel. Skyler, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So lots going on in the world these days, definitely not business as usual. How are you guys faring over at Unsung headquarters?
It'd be selfish to complain. I think just obviously without undermining the health scare at large, I think that there's just a lot of benefit that can come out of these times, and obviously just kind of getting us out of our day-to-day routine and trying to look at things from a different perspective when often it's hard to see when we're caught up in the grind. So definitely obviously a little bit more challenging in terms of just distribution and getting into spring. This is usually a pretty busy time for us after a slow first quarter. But definitely just trying to maximize the opportunity in terms of what we can control and, not get caught flat-footed when we come out of it, but we're healthy, and that's the main thing.
Absolutely. There's things that come before, the bottom line there, and health is definitely one of them. So, but you touched on something there as far as it's for the clothing industry there. Things are cyclical, and spring would normally be a time where you're launching into all your summer wear and all of that. So, is there anything that you guys have sort of done to pivot or move in a different direction as far as sales or your product launches?
So for anybody that's listening that isn't too familiar with the brand, we have our online, which is obviously our number one priority, and then the shop being closed, that's obviously a revenue stream right now that's been shut down, and then our wholesale division, which is a big one for us, so our co-branding, that would be at basically a total halt. So once again, just trying to focus on what you can control on the online aspect. We've definitely seen some gaps in inventory in terms of our top sellers. But it's you're kind of fighting a losing battle. I mean, like, you can constantly look to see if there's other options and other ways to kind of get products in. I mean, like, we've had stuff that's been stuck with UPS for 2 months now. But there's no point in beating yourself up over what you can't control. Really, it would just be focusing on the products that we do have right now, and even more so. I mean, it's definitely a difficult time for a lot of people, and we've almost been more quiet on even social media in the sense, just so that it doesn't come across that we're trying to sell during these times. If anything, just really appreciate the customers who are supporting us online, and at this time will pass. It's not going to last forever. So it's just control everything, even on the back end, and just try to make things more efficient. So.
Yeah, no, for sure. We're definitely in uncharted waters here. And, you guys, as well as a lot of businesses, ourselves included here, have had to get creative and pivot and, try and come up with some solutions there to try and do the best we can. Because there is no timeline on this. So I think people getting creative though is definitely key to as you say, coming out of this and hitting the ground running there. So
I think that it's, you know, just really trying to look at the positives in it all. I mean, like one huge reflection that I've had during this time, and obviously you're familiar with how the brand started, just from grassroots, but like when you start from that beginning stage, your gratitude and just excitement about every sale that you made and just the people that are supporting you, you know, it's when you're starting to see your dream become reality, it's an unbelievable feeling. And I'll be the first to say that, you know, I still try to go back to those moments where, you know, every single thing that we've, you know, every little accomplishment or every sale that you have, it's just, you know, you really focus on that and you kind of build on those types of things. And that's really what you can control. And, you know, looking at the dollars that we spend in marketing on a year-round basis, during this time, having a bit more time to, you know, take time to write a few like handwritten letters on the invoices for the online orders that we've had coming through, we've actually had more photo tags on Instagram, whether it be stories or posts, of people highlighting that. And I think it brings up a really good point of how, you know, in this technology world that we live in, and even though it's online sales, you know, people love the fact that it's coming from another like-minded person. So I think in terms of just the way that it's going to restructure business after this I'm actually really looking forward to it. I think that you're going to see a lot of people who are, you know, forced to really, you know, get back in tune with their customers and, you know, really look at how are you providing them value, and what is it that your product, you know, how does that serve a purpose for them, and, you know, making sure that they know that they're thanked.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And you know, yeah, I'm wearing my Unsung Hero T-shirt here as well. And you know, you and I have had the pleasure of working together on a few things in the past. You know, just even simple things like our Dine Sports staff shirts. You know, we used you guys, and we've been super thrilled with the quality and the product there. But for those that maybe might not be familiar with sort of the Unsung Hero brand or how you guys got started, how did this all begin? You know, what made you interested in getting into not only the clothing industry, but launching your own brand as well too?
Yeah, it's such a big question, and it's obviously asked frequently. And I think just kind of shooting from the hip on that one is always best, because I couldn't really tell you when it was, like the specific time would have been when the idea would have been clothing as our vehicle. But truthfully, it was something that I had, you know, kind of envisioned really, really young. I mean, I have documentation back to when I was like 11 or 12 years old, when I started working out, and you know, obviously just having a hockey background, it kind of really got the juice flowing on that. For myself, just, you know, I struggled in the classroom as a kid. I was definitely a busybody, and just you know, the classroom wasn't my space, and so a lot of my time and development time was after school, just doing a lot of creative stuff, just as an outlet to really kind of, it was almost my confidence booster, if you will, just to really try to, you know, figure out what it was that I was good at, and what I could grow in, and just what came naturally to me. And I think as, you know, a kid, you kind of find your purpose as you grow up, when you just do the things that you love. And that's really kind of how the Unsung thing kind of came about. It was a lot of fitness related ideas, a lot of athletic related influence. And as I kind of built this out, I just realized that, you know, there was an idea and there was a community that could be built through this. And that there was a lot of people that would be able to relate to a lot of the values that, you know, the brand, you know, really emphasizes on today. So to be totally honest, the clothing side was something I knew absolutely nothing about. And it was, I was 19. I made the move to the capital. Basically, I'd saved up first and last rent, and I had $1,000 credit card to kind of get me going. And the intention was to basically go take a small business program at Algonquin. And I just realized pretty quickly that basically the classroom just wasn't my space. And I wanted to kind of use that time to basically focus on like the space within the clothing industry that I needed to study specifically. And that if I was going to make any mistakes or even just kind of use my journey as my own education, as we're constantly learning in business, that was going to be the best play for me. And basically, like what Unsung embodies is, and then like what it's developed to, is that it's not that Unsung Hero is a self-proclaimed title. It's more so that it's a set of virtues that we aspire toward in our everyday life. And I think that as, you know, a former athlete, like that's all you know is just basically like what, like your goal setting and that competitiveness and that need to move and to create. And also too, just, you know, the teamwork aspect of it and aligning and working together. And Unsung basically became that outlet for me, that was something that could carry on afterwards. Like yourself, you know, you're still connected to the sports world. And I mean, it's definitely expanded, evolved, changed so much since then, but I think we really had to root back to where it had first started. You know, that's definitely still our core.
Awesome. And you know, just wanted to maybe expand on a little point there that you mentioned as well too, is that, you know, the classroom setting is not for everyone, right? There's all sorts of different learning types out there, whether it's, you know, tactical or theoretical or just, you know, getting out there and getting your hands dirty and diving right into it there.
Right.
What sort of a role do you think, you know, going out there and maybe learning on the fly and making some mistakes along the way and adjusting your business model sort of played in the development of the brand versus, as you say, sitting and learning about theoretical business models in a classroom setting? Do you think that sped up the process of getting from where you started to where you are now, or do you think it maybe lengthened the process, but you learned more along the way? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, there's definitely the pros and cons. I think the pros outweigh the cons, and not to, you know, paint education with, you know, one brush. I think there's certain things that, you know, do require that. I think I think in the last, you know what I mean, decade or so, entrepreneurship has become glamorized, and it's kind of like the thing to do when you're independent and a self-made man and whatnot. But I think that it's grossly underestimated for, you know, like what it takes to actually be an entrepreneur. And I think that there's certain things within the school or classroom setting that you can't really learn. For myself, a lot of the influences that I've had, right, and basically like that I've kind of sought out more so, is because there's not really anybody like specific to this industry, unless you're looking at like the, you know, the gurus in the fitness industry. Like there's nobody that you can really just like call up and kind of ask for advice within like the clothing industry, or like people that have built a brand. You know, as much as it's an oversaturated market, it's like there's few that, you know, get to that public kind of platform. So for myself, I've always sought out people that I could relate to and had built a business or failed through a business or something that I could learn firsthand experience. And I think that was something that wasn't big in the classroom setting. But also too, just that it's such a complex business that there's so many different aspects. I mean, like one, it's business in itself is not an easy thing to do. And you know, just as much as anyone else, there's so much that requires you to be on and consistent and sustainable in terms of just even knowing your numbers, which is something like I struggled with in school. I was like, I failed math on multiple occasions, and now I love math kind of thing. But that was on my own accord because it was something that I was interested in, and it was something that, when it's your hard-earned dollars, it's something that you become a little bit more passionate about. But that's just like there's you can run the business and stay organized, but really the clothing element of it that's a totally different ball game. So when you're kind of looking at the creative elements and even in our world now where things have changed drastically with going from, like, you look at the change in retail to online, it's something that you need to know where you're going to really be able to pivot and to kind of see the long game even through challenging times like these. And for myself, I would rather kind of go to war and kind of figure those things out as opposed to dwelling and maybe missing out on an opportunity that might not have ever happened, or I wouldn't have even met people like yourself through the process.
So you hit on the fact that there might be some, misconceptions about entrepreneurship, and, it's been glamorized. And, when you are a business owner, you're wearing a lot of hats. You're the marketing department, you're packaging, you're doing complaints, you're doing absolutely everything. Is there something that you learned along the way that now that you wish you had known maybe back when you first started Unsung?
I think just looking at my process, and admittedly, when I had first jumped into business, I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder in terms of just what I had saw the school system as. And it's a terrible way to look at it because I had some incredible teachers, and it's just that, we kind of all have like our different paths. So when I initially started Unsung, I kind of had this just like perspective that I needed to be perceived as an entrepreneur, and that, like, when I put things out there, that I needed to kind of prove that, my self-education and whatever else that I was working on would basically hold up to what, a paper on the wall has, type thing. And I think that that, along with just basically like the perfectionism that comes with that, and that's probably what I would have went back and been like, hey, like, just keep it real. And that's something I've always taken a ton of pride in. But I think where that kind of, it'll lead you down the wrong path if you continue that way for too long, because you lose focus of, really what your purpose is, and also to just why people are supporting you in the first place, and what your role is at that point to provide that for them. And obviously, I think there's an obligation that when you have continued support, and when people kind of get to that, champion, customer level where they're advocating for you and pushing for you, that really becomes your purpose to keep that going, and kind of, just stay the course. So that would probably be my best kind of perspective of looking back, is just that you really have to focus on what your strengths are, and what they're not. So obviously, too, just being someone that had self-educated, and when it's your own business, as much as there's not every day that you want to do accounting work and whatever, and that's the kind of stuff that you can kind of contract out, but you definitely become more interested in every aspect of every building block of the business, and you have to learn where scalability kind of comes in, and you're like, well, if I continue doing this, and like I've learned enough at this point that I can kind of like let this go, and you stay informed, just to kind of keep growing through that. But what is it that you do best, and what makes you happy, and if that's providing value for other people and you're growing, then I think you're well on your way.
Well, yeah, I think you sort of hit the nail on the head, and it speaks a lot to my own experience as well too, because Lord knows I was never a fan of math myself growing up. There, I was always great at math until they started putting actual letters into the equations, and then they lost me from there. But
Right.
I mean, you touched on how support is just such a huge thing, and especially in those early days, and in sales especially, your first couple of sales tend to end up being either friends or family, or mom goes and buys the first t-shirt from you, or whatever. But little by little, you build up that sort of community support. Was there ever a point that stands out to you as sort of maybe a tipping point where you started thinking, hey, I've really got something here?
Yeah. I don't know if I would say that if I've really felt that tipping point moment yet, if I'm being totally honest. And I think a lot of that is just because it's been full tilt since we started. You look at even like we launched the website as a licensed business. It was May 2012. I moved to the capital in 2009. And throughout that whole process, and as I had told you, like when I moved here, I was literally just like I had to, work to kind of stay afloat. And it was the restaurants and the bars at the time, and then that basically like all my downtime afterwards was, I had to keep working from there. And that was just building a good enough business plan that we could go to the bank and try to get funding, which was just a total uphill battle. But then on top of that, it was really understanding the business. I mean, like my initial thought when we first started was that you bought a print press and you kind of did that from your house type thing. And it's obviously an avenue, I suppose, but we were so green and just naive to like really what we were getting into, that everything that every sale that we got, and just kind of everything that kind of came our way, I think it provided more reassurance that we were on to something, as opposed to a tipping point, in that there was a serious opportunity here to grow something bigger than just a graphic t-shirt company, and that could inevitably, it basically provided a tool for people, and that we needed. Like my biggest priority at that point had just become, being really, really well developed, I guess, and kind of showing progression in terms of the product, and not just being known for what we were doing from the lifestyle perspective, but like as you had mentioned, just quality, and that's a very difficult thing to do when you're first getting started and you're operating with limited capital, without kind of drawing that out too much. I think when we really started doing like direct to manufacture, that was where I realized that things were kind of starting to fall into place, because we had the minimums to be able to back up the volume, and at the same time we were able to get a little bit more creative with what we were doing, as opposed to just finding wholesale blanks. So there's that. A lot of it has just been, as I mentioned, just so go that it's hard to really think about one particular moment, but just definitely just trying to focus every day and just be grateful for the people who are supporting us, and kind of build off of that.
For sure. And I
You
mean,
can come back to that point afterwards if you want.
yeah.
It's kind of, there's a bigger.
I mean, you also just address something that sort of is the elephant in the room as well too, in the sense that the clothing industry, especially the athletic wear industry, has traditionally been, just dominated by sort of the big three, right? Like the Nikes, the Adidas, the Under Armours, and you will from time to time see some of the smaller companies sort of start coming up, and then it's almost as if they either get bought out or they go by the wayside there. But with your brand, that it really does resonate with your customer base. And so, is there anything that you guys have been trying to do intentionally to carve out sort of a unique niche that resonates with people? Is there anything that you feel that you maybe do differently than other brands out there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a question that I think comes up most often, other than, what is Unsung Hero? And my whole perspective on that, and again, like when you're starting out, you're just so naive to not even being able to calculate if there's room for your business, or like you just kind of like put it out there and go full fledged. My initial thought, even if you would have asked me this question at the beginning, is just that, I mean, every company has to start somewhere, and I think if you get too focused on these big brands and just kind of the the intimidation of the levels that they're at, you'll never get started. And truthfully, I mean, you got to really kind of use them as inspiration and just bootstrap a lot of their hardships to try to not make those same mistakes, especially as a small company when finances are so tight. But also just being yourself. I think when you look at a lot of these companies, and obviously like trends come and go, but in order to really build a sustainable brand, it's what is the value that you're providing to your customers, and what can be tried and true even during times like these, right? And for us, it was quality from day one, because it's one thing to, like you had brought up the question earlier about friends and family supporting you kind of thing, and how you break that tipping point. It's your friends and family are only going to support you for so long if you have a crappy product. And if you can, at that point, you know what I mean, like focus on the product, the versatility of it from a lifestyle and athletic perspective, or if it's just something that resonates with them and it's comfortable, and it's something you can work in type thing. However that applies to the individual. But I think even as I progressed throughout the business and throughout the years, I mean, you look at some of the biggest industry disruptions in the last, I would say probably even decade or so. You look at craft beer, and you look at even the evolution of fitness centers, and you look at the hit that these big box gyms are taking because of CrossFit and boutique gyms. And I think that really kind of speaks a lot to where things are going and where things are becoming so technology based that people, want that communal element, and people want to be able to support local and feel like they're part of something too, right? And I think even once this time passes, I think we're going to see even more of that. And that's what I'm really excited about, is just that, people are going to be a little bit more conscious of where they're spending their hard-earned dollars. And I've had conversations with people even now being like, I'm willing to spend a couple bucks more to support local type thing. So I think that's really the big, I think when you get to a point, and again, I'm only forecasting with this, but when you get to a point where, you're at like a Nike level, and even say like a multi-million-dollar clothing company, there's tons of them out there. You crave what it was that you had when you first started, when you had the time to be able to shake hands with people and really, do these types of things where, you might be able to even do like a focus group where, you can actually jump in on these things and get feedback before you launch a campaign. And obviously, like as you grow and grow and grow, you can contract people out to do those types of things, but you miss that human element and that connection. So at that point, these companies are basically putting their marketing dollars to try to do like more communal efforts and have like local ambassadors. So it's funny how that kind of comes like full circle. So I think there's something to be emphasized when you're in those developing stages. And just, you know, to me, if you're staying true to who you are and what it is that what the value that you provide for your customers, I think you can make your way in any space.
Yeah. And you know, I think that is, you know, part of what it makes your brand so attractive, right? It is that honesty and that sense of community. And, you know, you guys, even from the onset, you've been really heavily involved with an emphasis on community, whether it's been your, you know, your unsung galas that you put on, whether it was the Stew Strong campaign, you know, you guys have always been big believers in giving back. So I guess my question is, where did this sense of wanting to pay it forward and staying connected to the community come from? And you know, why is it so integral to your brand?
Yeah, that's a tough topic, because a lot of, like, as we know, like a lot of brands will do that as almost like a platform kind of thing to say, hey, you know, I've donated X amount of dollars, and they're hoping to get either some sort of credibility from that, or even just, you know, business for that matter. And I think that part really kind of gives me like an eerie feeling. I hate that so much. But truthfully, you know, growing up in the church back home, and like we came from a blue collar family. I mean, like we had a roof over our head, but it was, you know, like we made the best of what we had. And really, like, our whole mantra is just that, you know, you bring other people up with you. You know what I mean? Like, nobody kind of, you try to draw the best out of people. And, you know, if you can play a significant role in, you know, helping people find their purpose and happiness, and once you've found that, I think it's an obligation. And I mean, like, even looking back to like when I was a kid, I mean, like, we would do, you know, food drives for members in the church that, you know what I mean, like, couldn't afford rent or groceries during a certain time. And a lot of times, and I know even from my family perspective, I know that we probably weren't in the best position to be able to do those types of things. And I think when you're ingrained with that at a young age, it just kind of becomes part of you, where you know, I think it's almost like paying it forward as a form of gratitude. And for us, like, nothing that we ever did or have done so far with Unsung in terms of just our charity work was ever anything that was really like overly thought out as just like, hey, we have to give back because, you know, we're now at this point. It was just that, you know, the brand was totally organic, and everything that we've learned from, you know, learning the graphic design space and or videography or whatever, and then like next thing you know, as you're building your company, then you start working with other collaborators, and you know, if you can kind of bring everyone together and you know, put all your brains together, and then that benefits the community, and you can have a good time doing it. You know, I often think about the Stew Strong thing, as you had mentioned. And I mean, that was something that was just totally just spontaneous, and nobody really ever expected that. And I couldn't really tell you exactly how that went down, but Stu and I were talking. There was social media outpour of people who had said like getting some sort of like funding or doing something for that. And actually, you know what, that was probably one of the tipping points to kind of touch on, to be honest, because at that point I had the design, like I had done that design, and I'm almost positive it was within like maybe a day, and that was just off a brief conversation. And you just kind of get into this mode where you're like, what, how can I contribute? What can I do? It's not that we have a ton of money that we could have just donated ourselves. And so you have your skill sets, and so, you know, that design, I mean, it came out way better than I had even envisioned, without giving myself too much of a pat on the back on that one. But, you know, we had the tools, we had the screen printers, and it was just like, it wasn't even so much about like the after effect. It was just like, hey, like, we're going to put our best effort out there to do what we can. and, every little bit helps. And that one especially ended up being a huge, huge success. That was unbelievable. And once again, getting back to kind of just starting and just going at it as opposed to overthinking that process. I mean, that was when our online really started to kind of move, and we experienced more volume online from that than we had ever seen before. So we were forced at that point to, kind of look at, what do we need to do to make this an efficient process so customers are getting their orders within, 48 hours type thing. And then we even implemented like a pre-order process because we had sold out within it was in no time. So yeah, I mean, it was certainly a roller coaster, but I think like that will forever be part of Unsung Hero, is that, our job is that we're constantly trying to extract people's best. And that really is probably the best elevator pitch.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, I think that authenticity really does come through in everything that you guys do, whether it is from the branding side to just your interactions with the community. And, I myself have been to some of your events in the past too. And like you say, you can usually sniff out pretty quickly which events are just, look at me events versus, no, we're actually doing this for things that are bigger than ourselves. And we're genuine in our efforts that we want to give back in that. And, your brand has always come across as authentic and very invested in the community that you're trying to build and you're trying to foster there as well. And I think that, goes all the way up the sort of food chain as well too. And, I think a big part of what's helped you guys develop hasn't been, splashy TV or radio ads or anything like that. It's been the word of mouth, to the point where, your products have now started to actually catch on with, some professional athletes as well too. And so, some of the other brands that are out there would kill to have, an NHL player giving their Hockey Night in Canada interview wearing one of their t-shirts type thing. So when you guys got started, was the goal to always try and maybe target some of the professional athletes and use that to sort of get the awareness out there? Or did that just sort of come naturally and you were as surprised to see them wearing your gear as the next person?
Yeah, I was definitely surprised for sure. And I mean, just kind of in conversation now, that was definitely an early, I wouldn't say tipping point, because that didn't make the brand, but it certainly got us off to an early start. When I think there's a ton of value, first and foremost, with basically having just humble beginnings would probably be the best way to put it. And I was very, very fortunate as a kid that I still had the opportunity to play hockey. And, we weren't coming from a family of two brothers and a sister. We kind of picked our sport and that was it. It wasn't, all the extras. And so you definitely learn to appreciate every little bit of that. And, that becomes who you are, especially being up north, coming from Timmins. So as that kind of segued, you just kind of even just looking at when we had first started, it was, you basically have to look at every resource that you have and every asset, just to kind of bring it all together in a way that, it looks like an actual entity without being too sloppy. And, I knew the hockey world, and I was just very, very fortunate that at the time, I was connected through a buddy with Giroux, and being that Giroux is from back home, we had a lot of mutual friends, and that kind of, we connected that way, and he became a buddy. And at that time, that was when Claude was the NHL cover boy. And so we hit it at a really good time there. And that was actually during a time of when the lockout had happened. And so yeah, we definitely got some good push there. And I think in the hockey world and just any sports, it's not once you kind of break into one locker room, it's pretty easy to kind of disperse that way. I was just very humbled by the fact that, so many guys had taken a liking to the brand. And I think that it definitely provided some reassurance as to what we were doing. Like when you think of how much these athletes get on, like how much is given to them and just sponsorships and stuff like that. But yeah, so that definitely had helped. But I will say that it provided some challenges too at the same time, because what ended up happening was, you're a small company, and next thing you know, you have X amount of NHL players wearing your product, and the toughest challenge was breaking into other sports. Unfortunately, the CFL isn't as glamorized as the NFL. And even when you start looking at like the NBA, I mean, when guys are making the kind of money that they're making and the sponsorships that they have, it's significantly more difficult to kind of break into those spaces. So at the beginning, I mean, it wasn't uncommon that people thought we were a hockey company. And you realize pretty quickly how important your marketing is, and, finding a healthy balance of, with your social media, say if it was like athletes, that it's not continuous hockey related things. So that was definitely a huge challenge that we needed to overcome. But even still to this day, I mean, like we have a good core of guys that are still supporting, and we don't I try not to be too pushy with that stuff. I think it's something that if they really like the product, they'll wear it, and you'll see it type thing, and play the long game that way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always nice to sort of catch lightning in a bottle there. And like you said, you kind of, it all came together at a really good time, and, good things sort of domino their way from there.
Yeah.
I mean, a big part of why we're trying to put these YouTubes and podcast videos together is we want people to be able to take something from them, right? So, as much as we love chatting with all of our guests here, we want to make sure that the listeners are also taking tangible things that, if they are looking at starting a business, or if they are trying to make that jump into athletics or whatever to the next level, that they've got some sort of roadmap to it. So, with that in mind, if you had to give one piece of advice to someone who is looking at starting out in the clothing or apparel industry, what would that be?
Don't. No. I think with any business, and I kind of touched on this earlier, is you really have to look at what value does your product bring when you're getting into the entrepreneurial space. And I mean, you asked for one, but I think that's a pretty heavy question. Two, it would be that, generally, what is your gift? Like, what are you naturally good at that that's something that you feel that confident about, and something that you can develop and grow in. And also too, just understanding if it's, if this is going to be a long-term thing, or if this is going to be a catalyst for, say, had I just started as this would be my education, and this would be my experience, and then I kind of moved on to something later on. If it's specific to the clothing industry, you really have to look at, what is going to separate you from others, as you had asked earlier. I think where, a lot of companies are really breaking industries now, or with different fabrics and stuff like that. So like if that's your thing, where you've developed a specific type of garment or whatever, where that's not on the market yet, that's obviously like a huge thing. But in terms of like the lifestyle apparel industry, which is it's a pretty wide title, if you will, you really have to just focus on like, who is your consumer, who are the people that you're targeting, and why. And that's really what I've kind of learned in the process. I mean, like when we started, we were just like, we were trying to create a really good quality product, and at the time everything was fairly screen printed and graphic based. I mean, fashion's changed quite a bit since then, from like the Ed Hardy and Affliction days, but it's you have to grow that way, and for us, and I think if there's anybody that can take anything from that, it's just being willing to adapt to obviously like staying current with like what the trends are, and not so much like that you need to, you know, you got to pave your own path, but just what is the need for your product, and you know, how do you plan on sustaining that in a way that you know, you're not getting too focused on what you had asked earlier about like just like these like becoming another Nike or Adidas, because that's not your story. And I think the more that you can tap into that, and make sure that that's a constant throughout your whole journey, there's a way to make it happen. But at the same time too, it's you have to think big, but operate on like a small level, in the sense that, you know, you can make a really good living by starting like a clothing company that is, you know, very local, much to my point earlier about craft beer, you know what I mean? But is that going to provide you enough fulfillment with the work that's involved, just to, you know, to be able to kind of do that for the rest of your life? Or are you getting consumed by the fact that you're not going to start unless you can become the next Nike type thing? So I think you have to keep your standard high, but there's also a lot of trouble that comes with when you get too focused on that big picture mentality, and that just because, like, to me, then you get lost in who you are, and you're willing to kind of break the mold a little bit in terms of like how you want it to be identified, and we definitely experienced that on multiple occasions.
Amazing. Well, you know what? Thank you so much for giving up your time and joining us today here. But before I let you go, where can people find you? Where can people get more information about Unsung Hero, or even check out the products that you guys have?
Yeah, so the number one spot would be our website, so www.unsunghero.ca. We're on all the platforms, Facebook, Instagram. Those would probably be the best resources. When things get back to normal, if it's our Ottawa community, we've actually opened up our showroom to the public during the week, so that's another place where people can kind of drop in and learn more about the brand and check out the product and save the shipping fees. But yeah, we're really only a phone call or email away as well too. We try to keep that as organic as possible, and for people that wanted to just call in and do it the old school way.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much for joining us, and you guys stay safe and healthy over there. And for those that are listening and watching, be sure to check out Unsung Hero Clothing brand.
Appreciate having me, man.
And that's a wrap for another episode of the Dine Sports Podcast Network and YouTube page. Thanks very much for taking the time to join us. We appreciate it as always. If you liked what you saw, make sure you subscribe, share, comment. Make sure to hop on all of our social media pages and follow us as well there. Huge shout out to Skyler Winsor for joining us today and walking us through his journey as far as his adventures with Unsung Hero and making impacts in the community. Thanks very much, and we'll see you guys next week.